Hi, welcome to True Creeps, where the stories are true and the creeps are real. We'll cover stories from grotesque gore to the possibly plausible paranormal, to horrifying history, to tense and terrible true crime, and everything else that goes bump in the night. We're your hosts, Amanda. And I'm Lindsay, and we want you to join us while we creep. We cover mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody! Today we're going to talk about Béla Lugosi's mirror. Thank you to Natasha, one of our patrons, who suggested this episode.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to talk about his mirror because there's rumors that it's cursed or haunted or that there's some dark energy associated with it.
I feel like that about like every mirror.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that all mirrors are a little bit creepy.
Yes.
Whenever I watch any horror, suspense, or honestly any movie where there's going to be a dark room with a mirror, I am looking at that mirror to see, like, what else are we going to see?
Mm-hmm.
Even when I'm expecting it, I jump.
Oh, yeah. Especially horror movies. Like, anytime there's mention of a mirror or someone's carrying a mirror or looking in a mirror, I'm already just nervous.
Yes. I'm like, nothing good is going to come from that mirror.
Mm-mm.
You can tell when they are purposely, like, focusing on the mirror.
Well, yeah. But even if they just, like, walk into the house and you're like, there's a mirror, or they go any bathroom scene with a mirror.
Oh, yeah. Especially if there's a shower with the curtain closed.
Yep.
Because you're like, which one is it?
Yes.
By the way, my dog Moo's in the room. Right now, she's making mouth sounds a little bit too loud. She'll probably be snoring later. So there are rumors that Béla Lugosi was very into the occult and that he would scry with this mirror. Some sources say that he would look into his future, while others say that he was trying to talk to his dead wife.
Very versatile mirror.
Love that for him. This particular mirror is arch-shaped, and at the bottom of it, where it would be like a 90-degree angle, it's curved a little bit, like a rounded edge.
Mm-hmm.
The frame itself is black, and then there's filigree on the top, but not on the sides. We looked on the internet to find a mirror that was similar to this, partially because we were like, okay, this mirror in the photos we see, is it actually from the time when he was alive?
Mm-hmm.
Can we find this mirror like being made in the 80s and it has nothing to do with him? We don't know. But there are so many black filigree mirrors that exist, all stunning, but we couldn't find any that looked exactly like this. Many of them have the filigree on the sides and the top, but Béla's doesn't. So we couldn't really confirm if this particular mirror that is in Zach Bagans' museum, hence our skepticism as to whether this is a real mirror from that time period or not.
Yeah.
We can't tell when it's from, how old it is.
Right.
It could be from 100 years ago. It could be from 40 years ago. Or last week. Not last week because it went to the museum earlier than that. We'll share other people's posts about the mirror because they're likely copyrighted and we can't share them ourselves, but we'll share the content from other people on our Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
But if you look up Béla Lugosi's mirror, you will find it very simply.
So Lindsay had mentioned that he would use it to scry. And we've actually talked about scrying in our Bloody Mary episode forever ago. But let's do a little quick recap of what it is. So scrying comes from descry, which is an Old English word that means to make out dimly or reveal. The first mention of scrying is in Shahnameh, which is a 10th century Persian text, and it's a semi-historic epic. And from our understanding, it's about the cup of Jamshid. And that was used by wizards or perhaps practitioners of esoteric sciences. And it was used for observing all 7 layers of the universe. Which is asking a lot, right? Scrying was outlawed as Christianity came to power, but many cultures have a form of scrying. Native Americans use smoke. Egyptians use oil gazing to gain wisdom. Ancient Egyptians use water, oil, and mirrors. And then ancient Greece, they would have sick people go to temple and look in a mirror. And if their reflection was healthy, then that meant that they were going to recover. However, if the reflection was scary or terrifying, that meant that their illness was terminal. How terrifying. Like if you got sick and you're like, I'm going to go look in a mirror. And then you just see yourself because you're really sick and you're like, well, fuck, I'm dying.
It's also like very dependent on your self-esteem and self-image. Like if you like how you look, then you're likely going to see yourself as healthy. But if you don't like how you look, How many times have you looked in the mirror? I say you, but like me looking in the mirror and being like, I've got a lot of dark circles under my eyes. Does that mean I'm dying, or does it mean that my skin is darker there?
Well, also, who looks good being sick?
I mean, I look fabulous.
All I think is when you're like, have you looked in the mirror? I just think of the picture from the cliff.
Oh, she's beauty. She's grace.
You know what? That's going to be my...
She is the penguin from Batman's little sister, who's not as attractive.
That'll be my new development is I will take a photo of everyone jumping off of a cliff into water.
Yeah.
I'm going to change it though. If you look terrible when you're jumping into the water, you'll have like a great, perfect life. However, if you look good jumping into water from a giant cliff, you're fucked. And for those newbies, we're talking about a trip that Lindsay and I made to Mexico where we went to a natural water park and Lindsay, out of her mind, jumped off a cliff into the water, and I took a photo that was not the best photo of Lindsay ever taken, but our favorite. It's so funny. Anywho, so back to scrying. Nostradamus is said to have used a bowl of water to scry to see future events, and some even say that he may have predicted his own death that way.
Ooh.
Ugh. All right, so don't look at bowls of water.
Do you just have bowls of water like around your house?
I don't know, like, what if you're gonna like boil some water? Don't look at it, I guess, as you're carrying it.
Do you put it in a bowl first? Oh, you mean like don't look at it in the pot?
Yeah, just don't look at it.
I was like, is that what you do? You like put your pot on the stove and then you fill a bowl with water and like walk it over and pour it in?
Yeah, I take a bowl and then dump it in.
I was like, that feels very inefficient. But no, you just meant the pot. I understand now.
When I turn on the water, it's already boiling.
Oh yeah, no worries. No worries for you.
Okay, so again, scrying again. We're going off on so many tangents today. So Middle Eastern countries used polished thumbnails to scry. Do you know how Lindsay and I feel about weird nails?
That is fascinating that they're using any reflective surface, but the idea of a thumbnail, because in my head, it's not attached.
Yeah.
That's where my yuck comes from. Like, I'm fine if it's on someone's hand, but the idea of like a full thumbnail gone.
Right. That's how I thought of it too. Yeah.
I'm thinking of the pain too.
Oh, no. So Dr. Morton Prince, who was a 19th century medical psychologist, used electric light bulbs to scry, which interesting. Like they are reflective.
Hopefully they're off.
Yeah. Yeah. I would hope so. So another one, Wiccans, they use rounded mirrors with a convex side that is painted black, or small cauldrons with black interiors filled with water.
Interesting.
I feel like that's probably the most common that you see, like in movies and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I picture scrying, I picture like that little handheld mirror, the round ones with the handle.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's always the case. I think it can be many different mirrors.
Well, I think of the cauldrons too.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes they'll put like some potions in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously movie, not real stuff, but like they'll put a potion in or something,
mm-hmm.
and then it'll show them things. Scryers have their own unique methods of interpreting what they see. So like someone may see something and see it as good, but like other parties may see that as not great.
Yeah.
In Edwardian Britain, women would look for visions of their future husbands in mirrors. And I think we talked about that as like a tradition or like a superstition a while back.
Yeah.
But if they saw him, great. That was good news.
Mm-hmm. However,
If they saw a grim specter, then that meant that they were going to die before they got married.
there has to be a third option here. Like, what if they just see themselves? Like, they're going to be a spinster? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, that means spinster. So the best time to scry is Samhain because the veil is the thinnest during that time.
Oh.
And same thing, we talked about that too.
Yeah,
A while back.
we did. That was a good episode, like our Halloween
Yeah.
traditions and history one. I did like that one.
Isn't that where we got the bat bonfire too?
It is where the bat bonfire came from. Okay, so we have done our scrying history and background. Let's now talk about Béla Lugosi. So before he was known as Béla Lugosi, he was known as Béla Ferenc Dejú Blescu. He grew up in a middle-class family, and he grew up in Hungary. He was born in 1882. His father was a baker, And in 1882, he opened up a small savings bank in the town where they live, which was Lugosi, which is where Lugosi comes from. And this was only 50 miles from Transylvania. He struggled in school, and when he was a kid, someone asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said he wanted to be a highway bandit, which I think a little kid being like, I would like to be a highway bandit is kind of cute and adorable.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think he just wanted the evil horse that comes along with it.
I mean, why not? Who doesn't want an evil horse?
We're just doing callbacks to like all of our episodes today.
Yeah, this is a test. It really is. But I mean, again, who doesn't want an evil horse? So other than being a highway bandit, when he was young, he also wanted to be an actor. And not surprisingly, his family wasn't too excited about this.
No.
Which is fair. I can't imagine people in the 1800s were like, yeah, you should be an actor. That's the best profession there is. Super stable.
Right. So eventually he left home to find work. And specifically, he walked 300 miles to go to an industrial center so he could get some work as a miner.
And I would walk 300 miles to become a miner. You're welcome. You're welcome.
No, don't get us bad reviews.
Oh, fuck. You're right. I'm not allowed to sing.
When we were researching and saw this fact, I put in our outline, I really hope Lindsay ends up saying this so that she'll sing it.
Who am I? Who am I to refuse Amanda?
Right? I just love her singing. So Béla was known to exaggerate a bit. So likely he did not walk 300 miles, but he thinks he did. In 1941, in an interview, he also claimed that he had stolen 700 hats.
Who the fuck needs that many hats? That's a lot of hats.
He's like, you know what I did? I stole 700 hats.
Also, like, have you ever been into a haberdashery?
Why?
They often don't have 700 hats just laying around.
Where are you going to put 700 hats?
Like, did he go to different haberdasheries to find 700 hats? Was it like a long game?
No, he was a highway bandit and ended up stealing 700 hats.
It's like a shipment of hats. Yes.
Oh, I just figured one by one as people passed by. On his 300-mile journey.
Oh, I like that you were like, he stole like hats that people owned individually.
Yes.
I thought that he was just going to a haberdashery. How many times have I said haberdashery? So many, because it's a fun word to say. But I thought they were fresh hats, not used hats.
Oh, no, I just figured, I mean, he had 300 miles that he thinks he did, so.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
You know. But no one needs that many hats. So he worked as a miner and a railroad worker until he was 18. And it was then that Velma, his sister, had her husband help Béla become part of a traveling theater troupe.
Love it.
So kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So he was exempt from the World War I draft because of his professional status, but he actually chose to enlist anyways. So he became a lieutenant in the 43rd Royal Hungarian Infantry. He was promoted to ski patrol, and unfortunately, he was actually wounded twice in battles, but he did receive a medal for his service.
Now, over the next 20 years, he was fired from about 20 different jobs because he just wasn't doing well. But I mean, he got better with rejection. During this time period, that's when he changed his name from Bleshko to Lugosi. Because again, as we mentioned earlier, name of his hometown. He was invited to join the National Theatre of Budapest, but left for Germany soon after. And Béla spent several years acting in silent films in Germany. In 1920, he moved to America on a merchant ship, and that ship landed in New Orleans. From there, he went to New York City. At the time, he didn't speak any English, but when he had his first English-speaking role just 2 years later in 1922, he read his lines to himself so that he could learn English. And the name of the production was The Red Poppy. He was then cast in a stage production of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
This is a big deal.
Big deal. Big deal, yes.
Especially for him.
Béla was then cast to play Dracula for the film adaptation that was released in 1931. And if someone was like, can you describe what Béla Lugosi looks like? Most people are like, I don't know who that is. But if they were like, if someone said, can you describe what Dracula looks like? You would describe Béla Lugosi. When you think Dracula, it is Béla. Even though there's other actors who have played him, but I feel like I think he's the most iconic.
He's what comes to mind for sure.
Yes. He wasn't the first choice for the role, but the original choice, Lon Chaney, died. So then he was cast as Dracula. It's also just like how fitting for someone who grew up 50 miles away from Transylvania to then play Dracula.
Yeah.
The publicity department of the production company, Universal Studios, decided to concoct a mysterious backstory for Béla. They actually said that he was a Transylvanian count in real life. When discussing this, he said, "Never has a role so influenced and dominated an actor's life as has the role of Dracula. He has, at times, infused me with prosperity, and at other times, he has drained me of everything. It's a living, but it's also a curse. It's Dracula's curse." It really does make me think of the publicity that they did for Blair Witch Project,
Yes.
where it really impacted the actors themselves. And there was this blurring of what was real and what wasn't, and it was purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
He only made about $3,500 for this role. And today that would only be $70,000, which is not a big amount for considering
No.
like how big it was. The film brought in $85,000, which today would be about $1.7 million. I do think that it would actually be more in today's money because it's not just box office. Like you would have streaming and products and all these other things that factor into how much money a movie makes.
That's true.
So from then on, he was typically only cast in horror movies, but he wanted to work in other genres. Now, in 1938, Béla and his wife, Lillian Arch, had a son, Béla Jr., and Béla couldn't afford to pay the hospital bill for his child, and his home was eventually foreclosed on for the bill.
Sad.
Him and Lillian divorced in 1953.
Another thing about Béla is that he had substance abuse struggles, and they were very public. He couldn't support himself, and he asked a judge to commit him, and then the judge actually did. He was then sent to the Los Angeles General Hospital psychopathic ward to work on his substance abuse issues. Béla had wanted a comeback in movies, but unfortunately it never really happened. He was, though, in plays, so he was still doing, acting work.
Yeah, and some of the last things we've talked about, like it kind of bounces around chronologically because his substance abuse spanned for a long time.
Yeah.
I just find that so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Especially for somebody who's iconic.
Right. Like everyone's seen him, but they don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So he died in 1997 when he was 77 years old, and Béla was buried in one of his Dracula capes, which I didn't know that before. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
As we noted earlier, many people believe that Béla Lugosi's mirror had some paranormal something to it because the next person who was rumored to own it was murdered, and it happened in front of the mirror.
Whew. Whew.
Yeah.
Chills.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that person, and that is Frank Celedry. Frank was born on January 20th of 1928 in Illinois. He worked as a criminal defense attorney, and he also was a writer and a director of Blackenstein. Frank enjoyed flying single-engine airplanes, so he had a lot that he was into.
Mm-hmm.
He was also a member of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and this was a Hollywood social club. It was mostly comprised of boxers, wrestlers, or actors who had roles as fighters. And just a fun fact, Sylvester Stallone is a member.
I love that it's like people who are doing the thing and then people who are acting like they're doing the thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So Frank was also a part of the American Legion's Midtown Post. And people from both organizations had stories about how wonderful of a person Frank was. In the days leading up to his death, his sister, June Kirk, said that when they spoke, nothing in their conversation seemed amiss. Everything seemed fine. However, he did have the locks changed right before his murder. So, something must have been up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Frank also took out a large life insurance policy on himself.
Interesting. Suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Strange. So, begrudgingly, one of the sources that we used for today was a Deadly Possessions episode about Béla Lugosi's mirror. And some of Frank's relatives are on it. Their interview is where we get some of the facts from this, because in a moment, I'll explain exactly which part, but there's pieces of this where the only time you hear or see that detail is in that interview.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and it's family members, so we're going to just assume veracity, right? Like, people aren't hopefully going to lie about what happened to their family member when they were murdered, but...
Right.
So, on July 12th of 1982, law enforcement went to Frank's home for a welfare check. His friends hadn't heard from him in days, which was abnormal, so they were worried. So that's what prompted them to call law enforcement to see if they could go check on him. When police arrived, they found Frank dead in his bedroom from a gunshot wound to the back of his head. He was wearing pajamas and his arms and legs were bound. He was found on his knees with his head resting down on his bed. And that particular detail was from Frank's niece, Cindy Lee. Cindy also said that someone had stabbed Frank in his elbows and knees with a screwdriver.
That sounds hard.
Yes. After he was shot in the back of the head, the assailant then used the screwdriver to try to remove the bullet. It's a bit unclear whether they were successful in removing it or not, but from our understanding at this point in time, a bullet could be matched to a particular gun, so it might be for forensic reasons they were trying to remove it. Per Cindy, Frank was murdered in front of that mirror. He was last seen the previous Friday, and his autopsy showed that he had died a couple days before his body had been found, and his body was found on a Monday. So presumably, likely Saturday, I'm thinking.
The weekend.
Yes. Sources vary on whether there were signs of a struggle. Some say there were no signs, and others say that in a room other than his bedroom, law enforcement found furniture that was knocked over or pushed around, and there were some pieces even broken.
There are also no witnesses, and none of his neighbors heard anything. No gunshot, nothing. Law enforcement didn't believe Frank was murdered in relation to a robbery because there were lots of expensive stuff that was left behind. So he had, watches and jewelry, and nothing was taken. As far as Frank's sister and law enforcement are aware, Frank didn't have any enemies, and he didn't have any gambling addictions or anything like that. Law enforcement suspects that Frank may have known his killer because there were no signs of forced entry. And especially if there were no signs of a struggle, right? Maybe he knew who it was. Frank's sister said that he had big dogs and weapons. So she also thinks that it was someone that he knew because they didn't do anything. She was reluctant to talk to his friends about his murder, just in case she ended up talking, to the wrong person.
How scary.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
One of Frank's friends said that he had guns hidden all over the house, too. So it's odd that he didn't have one when he needed it. So again, that tells me he might have known the person because he didn't feel threatened.
I would also wonder if the wounds with the screwdriver were so that he couldn't.
Maybe. Cindy also said that she thought it was either someone who was very close to him or perhaps it was mob related, but we didn't really see a connection with the mob either, so not sure.
Yeah, some people just suggested that the way he was murdered and the way he was bound looked like it might be like a mob hit.
Right.
I think that's kind of how it happens. And because of the timing, I think, of mob presence in Hollywood.
Yeah. And sadly, his sister even saved up money so that she could offer a reward. And it was $10,000 for any information. And to this day, his murder is still unsolved.
That's so sad. So our reason for talking about Frank's murder is because whether this is proof that there's some dark energy around the mirror or that this is one of the reasons why the mirror is paranormal in some way, right? That's kind of the only way I can use to describe it. But let's talk about where the mirror is now. In the outline, I wrote, sigh. It's in Zach Bagans' museum.
Ugh.
Yeah, we don't like him. We are very clear about that. Imagine, Manda, you and I are ever in a position where we happen to be in the same room as him. We've talked so much shit. I'm cool about it because
I talked shit to his face. I hate that he's rude to ghosts.
I would be like, hey, can you go listen to our episode on Dybbuk boxes? Because I don't have the emotional energy to go through this again, but you're just so fucking wrong all the time that it makes me feel...
Right. And our motto is always be kind to humans and be kind to people, but also be kind to spirits and the unknown. And he's not that.
Oh, and he is not. It's also that whenever we talk about a case, we do our absolute best to make sure that we are respectful to the surviving members of the family. So I think that the way that he embellishes things is it's disrespectful to the people who have real experiences with the things that he has in his museum.
Yeah, and not even just the people that are still alive, but also, for example, Villisca. He brought the murder weapon back to that home where children were murdered. Children, babies, why? Why would you do that?
Having been at Villisca now, there is no amount of money that you could give me for me to be anywhere in the vicinity of that house with an axe.
Nope.
Like, there's just no amount of money. There's no amount of money that could get me there to do that. It also wouldn't occur to me. But I digress. We're talking about this mirror. So, a few moments ago, we mentioned Frank's niece, Cindy Lee, because she was on Deadly Possessions. But in the episode, she ends up donating the mirror to Zach because she couldn't in good conscience give it to anyone else. And she says, quote, "This item has caused my family so much anguish that I no longer feel safe with it."
That's sad.
Terrifying. She explained that Frank got the mirror when he moved into a home where Béla had previously lived. And because he was her uncle, after he died, the family then had the mirror. In the episode of Deadly Possessions, Zach says, oh yeah, Béla Lugosi was into the occult. He mentions a 1930s interview where Béla says that. And so, of course, we're like, we don't trust anything you say. Where is this, right? Because when we were researching Béla's background, anything we saw about him being involved in the occult was contemporary. It wasn't from when he was alive. It wasn't referencing particular interviews. It was all stemming back to this. So we're like, okay, is it that there's an interview out there and then people just aren't going and looking at it? So we watched every interview with Béla Lugosi that we could find. And we never found any mention of the occult in any of the interviews. However, in one of them, called Intimate Interviews, he was interviewed by Dorothy West. This is a super fucking strange and bizarre interview. So normally our sources are at the full end, and it'll still be in that list, but we're also going to add it like right after our show descriptions because you should go watch it. It's a ride. But so in that interview, he mentioned that when he was filming Dracula, the role haunted him. And he elaborated and said that he often dreamed of the dead and would wake up tired and depressed, which I could see how that could happen, right? Like it's gruesome.
Yeah.
Also, as an interesting note, Dorothy asked Béla what he was currently studying, which what a fun thing to ask people from now on. Like, hey, like, what are you learning about right now?
Yeah.
What like a fun little like tidbit of conversation rather than like, what's new? How's work? You know, like, no, like, what are you learning right now? Anyway, so Dorothy asked Béla this. And he says American slang. And then he just gives a few of his favorite pieces of American slang, which are, okay, cat's whiskers, baloney, and the last one was, and how, chef's kiss. Made my night when I saw that. I was like, this is what a treat. It's also, when I see him, I think Dracula. So hearing Dracula say those things is just a treat.
So anyways, back to this episode of Deadly Possessions. So Zach is going on and on about what might be going on with the mirror. And although he does spend an annoying amount of time postulating, eventually he does start to ask Cindy about her actual experiences with the mirror. He does love to talk, doesn't he?
Boy, does he.
So Cindy mentioned that 2 of her daughters had experiences with the mirror. And her eldest daughter's name isn't given, so we'll just call her the oldest sister as we talk. The younger sister's name is Irene. The older sister had taken the mirror with her when she moved out, and she would often stand in front of the mirror to curl her hair. And in some photos of the mirror, again, there's not too many great photos of it. It looks like it might have had a little ledge. So like if it does have that ledge, it might have been convenient to like sit the curling iron down on. But anyways, the older sister has had so much trauma with the mirror that she wouldn't even come onto the show to talk about it. So like that's how scared she was of it. On numerous occasions, the older sister saw a hand reach through and then the hand would grab her. And she would actually see and feel the hand, which is so freaking terrifying.
I don't want to shame her, but I don't know whether I could have kept it after one time. I guess I would probably second guess myself. Like, wait, did that just happen?
Yes. I'd be like, was I tired? Was I okay? Was that a long day?
Yeah.
And then when it happened again, no, fuck that. Fuck you, mirror. You're out.
I think that I would also become a little bit obsessed with it, though. I would be like, how'd that happen?
Trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I might not be able to live with it, but I would be like, I'm going to put this in a storage shed and come look at it sometime.
I feel like seeing and feeling things are very separate, though. Like if you see
yes
and feel something, that is like over the line.
Yes. You're like, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
I'm just going to make an assumption.
Right. So creepily, she would also feel someone standing behind her, and even the thing would bite into her neck.
That I find incredibly unsettling of the entire episode. I think that is the only part where I was like, like that one made me pause because it was like, your family knows the history of this mirror.
Yes.
What are the odds that you would have a vampire ghost thing? And also like,
yeah,
aren't you a vampire or a ghost? Like, are there ghosts of you see what I'm saying? Like,
right. I mean, yes.
I could see like if there was something in there, it might fuck with you in a way that was Dracula-esque.
Yeah.
Not to say that it is a vampire or not a vampire, but like whatever's in there, if it knows what people say about it, then it might act that way for fun.
That's true. That's true. We've had our few hours with some sort of trickster thing before, in my opinion. So,
yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess.
They like to be what you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Or to make you believe it more.
Mm-hmm.
Or pretend to be someone else. So maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not too surprising that this really impacted her. She went to a priest, sought mental health help, and even began to second guess herself, which all fair. Totally would do the same thing.
Wouldn't you want like some type of answer as to like how this happened?
Yeah.
And no one can give you an answer. There's no science answer for there's something coming out of a mirror. I feel it and experience it, where someone doesn't just tell you that you have some sort of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at one point, she even went to go stay with her parents because she was so afraid of being alone. And she slept with her younger sister, Irene, and she was only 14 at the time. Irene recounted the same stories that Cindy had about what had happened to the older sister and what she had experienced. Irene also noted how absolutely terrified her sister was, and she truly believed that she was telling the truth. Like, that is what her experience was.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, the mirror ended up back at Cindy's house.
After Irene moved out, she went to stay with her parents, and she slept in her old room, as one does. The mirror had been moved into her old room because no one was living in that room. Irene said that when she had gotten there and she was like, getting ready to go to sleep and all, like, it felt strange in there, but she chalked it up to just like the weird feeling you get when you're like sleeping back at home and you're like an adult.
Yeah.
And like it's just like a weird vibe. So she thought it was just that. That night when she slept, she had a terrifying dream. In the dream, she's being held down by a figure, and she didn't see all of them, but she did see dark hands and a dark face. In her dream, whatever this is holding her down, attacking her, and clawing at her. So Irene wakes up with a jolt. Fair. And she's like, waking up, and she could like remember the feeling of the scratches, right? So she's like kind of like looking at herself as one would. And then she sees the scratches on her body.
Yikes.
And they're all over her, including in places that she couldn't have reached, like the middle of her back.
Don't like that.
That would fuck me up.
Yeah.
That would fuck me up.
New bed.
Yep, new bed, new sounds. And so some of the scratches were even deep enough to break the skin. And remember, Irene didn't know the mirror was in the room. Now, she found out afterwards, and I'm sure that added a whole new level of terror. But
yeah.
Oof.
Don't like it.
No.
Mm-mm.
So Cindy seemed to be pretty relieved that Zach was going to take the mirror. Again, fair. And while Cindy was talking to Zach, she mentioned that she thinks that the mirror likes it when people have big reactions to it. So he was like standing in front of the mirror being like, I wonder if there's dark energy in here. And kind of unprompted is like, I think it likes when people notice it or something akin to that. And he goes, sometimes I wonder if the things that we have like it or not. But it's interesting that you say that, like unprompted. She's like, can't you feel that it likes it? He's like, yeah, which I don't normally believe him. But in that instance, like maybe he's a good actor. I don't think he is, but I believed her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
So Zach takes it into his collection, says it's his favorite thing ever.
As with everything else.
And he decides to run some experiments on it. So it's like people going down and being with the mirror and then seeing if they have dreams the next night.
Uh-huh.
But one of the people was a production assistant who was never planning on doing anything like this. And it was her first day. And I was like,
oh, that's rude.
Poor person, right? Now that night after they did the experiments, the basement flooded. And it ruined a bunch of production equipment. And he said it was the first time that the basement had flooded. I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, he's fucking with things all the time.
Who knows what he's made mad?
Exactly. So like it could have been the mirror, but it also could have been his fucking museum of stuff, Or simply just it happened.
Yeah. While I don't believe him or the origins that he attributes to things or what he thinks is the thing, there are bound to be items in there that are truly paranormal.
Yes. I mean, or it could have just been a fluke that it flooded.
Basins flood sometimes.
Yeah, they do. So let's talk about if any of this is actually true, as we usually do, right? Kenny Biddle really took a deep dive into connecting the dots on this legend and did an excellent investigation into the facts surrounding this. In his article on the Skeptical Inquirer website, Kenny found that Lugosi was married 5 times. We mentioned one of his wives earlier, but there were 3 before her and then 1 after her. His last wife, Hope, outlived him, and they got married in 1955, and then they were still together when he died in 1997.
So that begs the question, then which wife was he talking to in the mirror?
Right.
If he was talking to his wife, the woman who he was with for 40 years was still alive, and he had several wives. So who would he have been talking to?
And like, what was her history too? Was she into that stuff? Was that like something that they talked about before? Like, if something were to ever happen, let's do this.
Yeah. It's also just interesting to think that like he would pass and then like everything of his would be left somewhere, right? Like normally your spouse will get your belongings. Right? Like you're not going to just leave a furnished house somewhere.
Right. And if he really liked this mirror a lot, I mean, I guess as his current wife, if he's using it to talk to his ex-wife, you know, like, or his prior wife.
Like you move out and you just leave the mirror. You're like, ugh, that's his like infidelity mirror.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't even think about that. Like how offended would you be if your significant other was like, I am cheating on you via mirror.
Right. With like one of my past wives, I said ex-wife, but like past wives, maybe, you know, they passed away unexpectedly. But yeah, I wouldn't like that.
No.
I'd be like, fuck that mirror.
A whole new thing to be insecure about. Who are you talking to in the mirror? No, I'm kidding.
That's why it was left. Anyways, Kenny reached out to Béla's family to ask whether any of the addresses that Frank had lived in overlapped with Béla's addresses. Béla's addresses are listed on his website, but it seems like Kenny really wanted to double check, and neither of Frank's addresses matched any known residences for Béla. So remember, that's how he says he got the mirror, or it said that he got the mirror. So that's interesting.
Yes.
Kenny also asked whether Béla was interested in the occult or scrying, and the family said that they were unaware of those interests, and there's no evidence that that is true. I will say, though, like, half of my family doesn't know what I do on a daily basis, too. So, like, interesting.
But they could walk into your house and see that you like spooky stuff.
Yeah, but like I probably wouldn't talk to a mirror in front of them or tell them about it.
Now I'm just imagining someone like passively aggressively talking to a mirror. Like you've got a mirror boyfriend and you are sitting next to your husband and you're like, your mirror boyfriend's name's Todd. I don't know why. So Todd, let me tell you what Michael didn't do today. And like that's how you're talking in front of the mirror. There's no reason for my brain to go there, and yet that's where we are.
Perfect. Love it.
You might not like talk about it, but in your belongings there might be some evidence, there might be something, because I think one of the interesting things is that, like, okay, we mentioned that he has a website, right? It's run by his heir, it's run by his descendants. And they've like painstakingly like looked through everything that he's owned and really learned about like his history and life and like really preserve his memory in I think a beautiful way. And are very into like every single detail of his life and being open to finding new information. In the correspondence between Kenny and Béla's family, they even say like, if you find evidence of him having lived at another address, please let us know. So they're not like, we couldn't have possibly. It's more just, if you find evidence, let us know.
Right. And there's a lot of addresses.
And the way that they framed it was, we have no evidence of this.
Yes.
So I thought that was like tactful.
Right. And yeah, like on his website, there's a lot of places that he's lived.
Yes. Many, many places that he lived.
So a lot of chances for overlap, or at least like even like similar blocks or similar areas. I don't know. But interesting. But again, like, would my family know every little like spooky thing that I do, or like one of my ghost hunting tools? Would they know that I have it and I've used it Or if they saw it later, would they know that that was mine for sure? Probably not.
Yeah.
But his family also said that they didn't recognize the mirror itself.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, like, to be fair, I don't think my family would know which mirror was mine too in a lineup, which little one I just purchased.
I think that's fair, but I also, if it was a mirror that he was using for this like practice, it might be something that he kept in his bedroom, right? If that was true.
Mm-hmm. Or hidden away, yeah. I was going to say, Mike doesn't even know half the shit that we have, that we like own it together.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Ben doesn't know what's in this house. Like, I could have like cursed objects for days, just like sitting in a closet, and he would never know.
So going back to, was Béla interested in the occult? And his family was like, not that we're aware of, which fair. They may not be aware. Well, they also said that they suspect that the museum may have made up that information about Béla so that the mirror had a backstory, so that, you know, it had a place in the museum altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting, and like, we wouldn't put it past him after the Dybbuk box fiasco.
No, I would not. Or any of the many other things.
But again, like, it is fair that a family may not have known. Like, maybe he's kept it private.
Yeah. So remember that outside of Zach Bagans and his claims of Béla's occult practices, there's also the assertion that Frank lived at a place that Béla once lived in. And that comes from Frank. He told his family that. And so Kenny reached out to Cindy Lee, mentioned her earlier. She's the niece. And he found out just some interesting facts. So Frank lived at a home on Wedgwood Place, and that's where he acquired the mirror. Like, it was in that house when he moved in. And he took it with him when he moved to the home where he was murdered, which I believe was on Primrose. And the family all thought that the mirror once belonged to Béla Lugosi because Frank had spoken to them about him living where Béla had once lived. And I want to think that they believe that like he had possessions of him because of that.
Yeah. That
it was his mirror and he had talked about it. They never thought to question whether that was true or not. And I don't think that I would have either, right? Like, if somebody was really into it,
no,
and was like in a position where they could buy a person's house or have their effects because they had enough money, I could see why you would think that. And Frank was a big horror movie fan, so he was obviously very excited to have lived in a place where Béla may have lived. He also may have been told that.
Yeah,
like someone may have said that to him and lied.
Yeah, or I mean, someone could say like, oh, I believe Béla lived here before, or like, and why would you question it if like someone of authority, like a realtor or something like that, told you that? You'd be like, okay.
Yeah, or like maybe the mirror itself, like he got it from the Wedgwood home, but the person who had it there was like, oh, this was his mirror. And like, you just don't know how that came to be. But it's interesting that like his family had been operating as though that was fact. And I mean, like, again, I probably would have done the same thing. And while I don't believe that the mirror ever belonged to Béla Lugosi, I do think that there is something going on with it.
Yes.
Because the experiences of Cindy Lee's two daughters seem genuine and terrifying.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's Béla Lugosi. I don't know what it is, but I think there's something going on with it. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, it could just be some sort of haunted object. We don't know by what or who. But perhaps there's something. It doesn't sound very nice, but also maybe it feeds off of that energy. Like scaring people, it helps it in some way. So maybe it just likes it.
If so, it's probably in its ideal environment.
Yes, probably. Unfortunately.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that is our discussion on perhaps Béla Lugosi's mirror. Might be his, might not be.
Should we call the episode perhaps Béla Lugosi's mirror?
Yeah, probably.
It might give it away though.
Oh, that's true.
Because we tried to be like, it's his mirror, up until we were like, it's probably not.
We try so hard.
Sometimes.
Well, this, again, like Lindsay said, this was a recommendation from Natasha in our Patreon. So again, thank you very much. If you have any recommendations on haunted object stories or anything, let us know. Hit us up on our website or our social medias. In addition, it's almost our podiversary that's coming up super quick.
So excited.
And if you've been with us for a few years, you know that we do listener stories on our podiversary. So If you have any spooky, weird, strange, interesting stories to tell us about, we would love to hear them, especially if they have anything to do with intuition. That's been like our big obsession lately. Something when your gut was right and you had no reason to be. Any weird shit that you've seen, paranormal experiences. I know a few people have commented on stuff on our social media saying, when we talk about like true crime, that they knew that person or that they worked with specific people. Like, if you have a story related to anything we've talked about, we'd love to hear that too.
Yes. And even outside of our listener stories, if you ever have something to supplement to a true crime episode, feel free to reach out to us, because we have True Crime Digest episodes where we have updates, and we can include that in an update. If there's a perspective that you think that, needs to be added or you think is relevant, we're, happy to have a conversation about that.
Yes.
But in terms of like stories, I just cannot stress enough. It can be anything. Tell me a story about anything. Tell me the weird story, the weird lies your parents told you that were kind of spooky growing up.
Yep. So if you have a story, head to our website, truecreeps.com, and you'll see an area that says listener stories. It'll give you all the details, how to send us your story, whether it be a voice recording or if you want to type it up. We love them both.
Mm-hmm.
We'll send you a sticker as a thank you. We're actually in the process of creating a special one for this year's story givers.
Yes. And the only way you can get this sticker is by submitting a story.
Yes.
It can be typed, or you can tell us the story yourself. We kind of prefer the latter because we want to hear your lovely voice. If you misspeak or something, we're going to edit it for you. We'll make you sound amazing. But we like both, but you'll have a one-of-a-kind sticker.
Yes. Well, with that, have a great weekend.
Thanks for creeping with us. Thanks for listening. And as always, a special thank you to our patrons who support us via Patreon.
Please see the link in our show notes to learn more about how you, yes you, can begin to haunt the dump, guard vortexes, or even become a scorching Sasquatch.
Ooh. Also in our show notes, you can find the link to our website, more information on our sources, our social media handles, and our merch store.
We'd love for you to keep creeping with us. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with your fellow creeps and or ghosts.
I beg of you. I just really do need to point out that, one, later I found out that I was very sick. Didn't realize it at the time. It was a mistake to do that, but which also probably makes it a little bit more reasonable as to why I did it, because I'm terrified of heights. I thought I was just being brave.
She was out of her mind.
But apparently I was just out of my fucking mind. I had like a fever. It was like, whoa, let's go. I thought I was breezy for once. No, it's that like I was out of my fucking head and didn't realize it. But I had to wear a life vest that buckled up under. And when I jumped into the water, it did exactly what you think it did. And I was like underwater, above water, trying to not have like parts of my body become visible to strangers, not hit another person, not hit a rock. There's a lot of things going on. So I couldn't focus on, I guess, not looking mildly bald. I can't understand how that happened. It's a lot.
I don't know how your hair disappeared. You have hair.
I do have hair. There's like some gray in there and my like roots are lighter, but I remember that I had my roots done right before we left because I wanted to look good in pictures. And I don't know. I can't explain.
And for those newbies, we're talking about a trip that Lindsay and I made to Mexico where we went to a natural water park and Lindsay, out of her mind, jumped off a cliff into the water, and I took a photo that was not the best photo of Lindsay ever taken, but our favorite. It's so funny.
It was a place where you were supposed to jump, by the way. I feel like we need to, it wasn't like,
yes.
I just was like, you know what? That cliff, that's the fucking one. Let's go.
I'm just like, sure, Lindsay, jump off a cliff.
And everyone around me was like, sounds good. Ben's like, she's got life insurance. Why not? Like, let's go. Yeah. And also, I want to point out that there's not pictures of me jumping because they didn't even realize I had jumped. They were just like, oh shit, she's in the water. Like,
well, you were in line for a while.
I wasn't.
It took a while to walk over something. I think I might have been looking at a hermit crab.
I mean, that's fair. Amanda was very alarmed that at the natural water park where we were in natural water, that creatures existed.
I'm fine with the hermit crabs on land. I just don't want anything touching me in the water.
Is it anywhere or just your feet?
Well, not that they go in the water, I don't think, but
I don't know what hermit crabs do. It's not my business.
there's other forms of crab things and fish and ugh.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously in the end.
I like them existing. I just don't want them to touch me.
I mean, fair. I understand that.
I sent her, going back to a few episodes ago, today someone posted how to get cold water in Arizona during the summer. And I sent it to Lindsay.
It was a bowl of ice and or not a bowl. It was a colander of ice, like attached to the shower head, which is similar to what I suggested, mind you.
It was, yes.
I just said a cheesecloth.
Just tie it up there.
Pickle's crying at the door, which is very bizarre. So you keep going.
I don't know if they come up on your feed, but there's actors that have played specific roles for so long as like a specific profession.
Mm-hmm.
And then they forget that that's not their actual profession.
No.
I don't know if I read those articles when they come up, but like I've seen one where like one of the doctors from Grey's Anatomy was like on a flight.
Oh, no.
And someone said, we need a doctor. And she stood up and her husband's like, what the fuck are you doing? Sit down. And she's like, you're right. I can't do anything. But
yeah,
I think that's funny that like they become that, especially if it's been a long time.
I mean, I could see how like your brain could flip into that because sometimes you are that.
Right. Well, and I mean, especially for if you're actors that are playing it like fighters, they have to learn how to fight most of the time, right? And like really have like a training regimen and all that.
Yeah.
So they kind of become it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when you're acting to that degree, like I believe like Heath Ledger, for example, when he played the Joker, like being the Joker fucked with his head.
Mm-hmm.
It was a hard thing to do. And, even as Béla said, like Dracula's curse, like was that like sometimes he felt like him.
Yes. This can go at the end, but speaking of American slang, because like our language is fucked, right? Like our language is so hard. And I can't say where I was working, but when I was working, we had to work with other countries and we would share caseloads.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would do notes in a case and then someone from another country would do notes in a case. Right?
Yeah.
And one of the cases was in regards to a car. And the person said, my car was a lemon and it just didn't work, right? And the other country said, the car is not yellow. So this is inaccurate.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, like how you would like read that euphemism. And I wouldn't even consider not saying that, right? Like I would just assume someone knew what I meant.
Yeah, that. Or they, I think when they were on the phone with maybe someone here, they said, well, for the heck of it, we did this or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in their notes, they started saying, for the heck of it, we asked identification questions. For the heck of it, we processed the request. And so we're like, oh, no, that's not what it means. You can't use that.
Yeah.
But it's funny, the disconnect with
it's like flippant. Yeah.
American slang. But we always would laugh. We'd be like, oh, we know that they spoke to someone recently that said a new slang term.
It's hard.
It is. Like, I don't fault them at all. Our language is fucked, but it was funny.
Yeah. Lay down. She's digging somewhere. She's digging through the earth with this bed. It is. It is, in fact, with a bat bar.
Mm-hmm.
Bat bar.
In a railway. Blah.
Bram strokers.